Everyone, I decided to make this video because the topic's on my mind and hopefully I have some time to make a video. We'll see if I get interrupted or not, but I'm going to try to make it quick because I can get pretty long-winded when I talk about Jesus. But I have some food waiting for me that I just cooked, so hopefully that will motivate me to wrap it up quickly. But it's interesting that a few weeks ago I had a pretty intense experience in worship where I was just like, I felt like Holy Spirit was asking me to worship. I was going to bed and I was going to do some language study, some audio lessons, but I felt Him saying worship, and so I did that, and then these feelings started coming up in me, these strong desires and like an anxiousness, but a good anxiousness to really see more, because I've seen a lot of amazing things, of miracles, and I've seen Jesus do really powerful things in my life and the lives of others, and I want to see that always. And I was like, I have a lot to share. I've seen a lot. I have good things to share. Jesus has done amazing things in my life, and I want to see other people experience that. And the people that I do know, I do get to share with them, and we do see cool stuff. But I always want more, and we should always be desiring more. And like one of my older brother Aaron, he has a blog called Holy Discontent, and it's that idea of a holy discontent of not being satisfied with where things are now, being happy, being content with what we have, being thankful, but wanting more for others, not in a selfish way, but wanting to see everything we have be used and see God use our lives to really impact people, impact the world. Because when you know what you have, you really want to share it and impact people. But once I had that, I started praying that, and it was intense, and some people thought like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? A couple of people that I talked to, a couple of friends, like, what's wrong? What are you going through? I was like, I'm fine. I want to see more. And then I think it might have been the very next day, or at least that week. I don't remember if it was the very next day or not, but it was really soon after. I was working on a group project with a classmate, and she ends up I'm like, how are you? And she ends up sharing way more than she planned on sharing with me. And then in the middle of it, she's like, oh, I'm sorry, you don't want to hear all this. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. We don't even know each other. And I'm like, no, there's a reason you're telling me all of this. And Jesus has some plans for this encounter beyond just working on a group project. And I want to pray for you. And I prayed for her and started sharing things with her. Jesus just started wrecking her in a good way. And then the next time we met up, he told me to share my testimony with her. So I did. And she was blown away by Jesus. And then she told that to her daughter. And her daughter told her mom, wow, I was doubting, and I was having all these doubts and questions, and starting to think that none of this is real and not for me, but now I believe. And anyways, I'm starting off talking about that because it's cool. When you have that desire, and when you ask God, like, send me people or use me, not in a, the whole use me idea, that's just like a whole different topic, but you want to be active, and you want to use the gifts that God has given you and the revelation and the good things He's done in your life. You say, I want to share that with others. I want to see you impact other people through me. Then people start coming to you. And then since then, other people have randomly just started asking me questions, asking me spiritual questions, or coming up to me without me even starting the conversation. And today someone started asking me, like, aren't you a missionary and stuff? I'm like, yeah. And then somebody else was like, hey, what are you guys talking about? And I was like, Jesus. And just bring it to the point. Some people, they're uncomfortable, but just bring it. If they ask a question, just say yes. If anyone who wants to know, I'm an open book. I have lots to share. I want to share. And then other people started asking me questions about mission work and about God. And a friend, he said, I used to believe in God. Now I don't know so much. But I wonder if He does exist, if He really cares, and there's a lot of suffering in the world. And that's what I want to talk about right now, because it's on my mind. And if I don't make the video now, then I will probably end up forgetting about it. But he said, I see so much suffering in the world. And there was a conversation going on before that about suffering and what's messed up with humanity and all these problems, and racism and suffering, slavery, even modern day slavery, things like that. But then afterward, this friend, he said, I listened to a podcast, and it's by an atheist, and I don't listen because he's an atheist, but he did say something like, he shared a story about something that happened in Australia. Apparently there was a guy who went and assaulted a woman who was filling up her car with gas. assaulted her, stole her purse or something like that, ended up stealing her car, and then after he sold the car and had driven off a great distance, he realized there was her 3-year-old daughter in the car. He freaked out, abandoned the car, and left this girl in the hot desert in Australia. The police later got him, and they wanted to know where the girl was because she would die if they didn't find her soon. And he was saying that it was an argument for the just violence, and that violence sometimes is an answer because the guy wouldn't tell them where the girl was, but they started beating him up a little bit, and then he told them, and they went and they saved the girl. And my friend was saying, yeah, so if they hadn't used violence, then the girl would have died. What do you think about that? And then we actually had to go our separate ways. He said, next time we can talk about it. But I decided, sorry, my hair's in my face. I have to keep messing with my hair, but anyway, sorry about that. But trying to get it out of my eyes. I thought about it, and I'm like, just felt like sharing my thoughts on that, because is violence an answer? The answer, and we always hear violence is not the answer. And if God, something that goes along with that is, if God is real and if He cares, why is there so much suffering? And would God approve of using violence to save someone, or in certain cases? I believe in the message that Jesus brought about the Father, and Jesus is the image of the invisible God, and He taught us how to reign without violence, without physical violence, not to fight evil for evil, and not to resist evil, but to walk in the Spirit and use spiritual authority to push out evil and to bring a real lasting change, not just temporary satisfaction or satisfactory justice, but actual justice, actually setting captives free. But anyways, this question, I just have 2 questions for that question, for this atheist argument. First of all, why can't? First of all, if you have to hurt this man to get an answer from him, what if he doesn't answer you after a few punches in the face? What if he doesn't answer you and tell you where the girl is? What do you have to do? You have to go to the next step and get more violent, and you have to start torturing him. You have to go to more and more extreme methods of torture and violence to get the answer from him. And then the question is, at what point does it become wrong? If it's right, if it's acceptable, at what point does it become wrong? At what point do you stop and say, okay, we've gone too far, we shouldn't go any further, we can't do this because it's wrong? And if he doesn't answer, do you go all the way to killing him? And if you do have to go all the way to killing him, then you have not only the loss of this woman's child, a dead girl, but you now have a dead girl and a dead man. You have 2 deaths. Does that make it right? Is the mother satisfied? Obviously, she's not satisfied, right? That doesn't solve her problem. She still lost her daughter. Besides that, so the first question is, at what point, it's not black and white, but at what point does it become wrong if we accept it from the beginning, if the guy doesn't give up the information about where the girl is? And is it okay to kill him in order to save a life? Because we're taking, in this case, I believe, I'm not judging the cops who did that. I'm not judging anyone, and I understand the difficulty of the situation and of the decision. But I'm putting forth questions because there's questions on both sides. And the people in that situation who are beating him up, they probably felt like they were doing the right thing because the final result was to save this innocent little girl's life. And to save someone's life, that's a good end result. It's okay to take these evil tools of hurting someone, inflicting pain, taking evil methods and evil tools to bring about a good final result. And a lot of times we question, is it okay to use hatred and violence and evil tools to bring about a good final result? And I think we'd all agree that a lot of people have gotten into some twisted, messed up actions and ideas. A lot of people think they're doing the right thing, or they're going to bring about a better world, but they end up killing or committing genocide, or there are extreme cases of this. So that's the first question. At what point does it become wrong when you're torturing this guy? If it's just punching him in the face a few times until he tells the answer, okay, we accept that. But then if you have to start going further, it's wrong. Or if you have to keep going all the way and then you end up killing him, then it's wrong. So where do you draw the line? And then what if, besides that, why can't we just tell the guy, there's a girl that's in a car abandoned because of you. If she dies, it's on your hands. You'll be in prison for life. You'll be charged with murder. You'll be in prison for life if you don't tell us where she is and we find her in time. If you do tell us where she is, and if we do find her in time and we're able to save her, then you'll be charged with assault and theft and the other charges that were involved. which of the two do you want? Any guy in his right mind is gonna give up the information without you having to resort to violence. Anyone who's interested, has any self-interest at all, he doesn't want to be in prison for life. If he says no to that, and you have to resort to violence, it's the only explanation I can think of is that he has a mental health issue. He's sick in the head. If he's not like, okay, no, it's okay, you can charge me with murder, I'll be in jail for the rest of my life because I want this little girl dead that I don't even know. He doesn't want her dead. He wants to protect himself. He's going to give up the information. I don't know the actual story. I wasn't there. I could be wrong, but logic would say that generally that would be the case, that the person would give up the information without you having to resort to violence. But if they don't, and the person is mentally ill or whatever reason they have not to give up the information, they don't give up the information, then is it right to resort to violence? And then you start beating the person, and then you're beating someone that's mentally ill. You're torturing a mental patient. Is that okay? So I think it's important to bring up these other questions as well. I'm not giving a lot of answers, I'm bringing up questions, but I don't believe that, I believe violence is obviously, it is an answer. I don't think it is the answer. I don't think it's the best answer. Whenever we are left with human means, if we don't believe in God, if we don't think there's any such thing as supernatural aid, then I see how it's really easy to resort to violence as an answer or a solution to certain problems. Because we're left to our own devices, we're left to our own limitations, and we feel like we have to use violence. If you don't believe in God, if you don't believe in the supernatural power of love, forgiveness, if you don't believe in redemption, if you think that some people are evil and they will always be evil and they can't be redeemed, they're not worth forgiveness. If you believe in retributive justice, where if an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and if someone kills someone else and they have to be killed, if you believe in all of that, then violence is probably, in many cases, the best and the only answer that you're left with. But the reason I'm able to believe that there's a better answer than that is because I do believe in the supernatural, and it is the Christian viewpoint that Jesus taught us. And anyone who claims to be a Christian, and they need to look really carefully and take really seriously Jesus' words and the example he left for us. He left for us a very nonviolent example. It was not effective in the immediate natural circumstances because he died, but we're supposed to have a heavenly perspective and an eternal perspective. So it was the most effective act, him going to the cross, him allowing himself to be arrested, all of that, his death, burial, resurrection was the most effective, the single most effective act in human history. It changed the world forever. The world's now better because of what he did. Christianity spread and people started dying for him and living for love and living for others and denying selfishness because of Jesus and their love for Jesus, even being persecuted and burned at the stake and singing worship songs and singing praise. People were either crazy or there was something supernatural going on. But people started schools, people started hospitals. Of course, there are a lot of missionaries in history. I know I lived in Hawaii and studied Hawaiian history. There's a lot of bad things that came from a lot of missionaries as well, especially colonists that claimed to go to bring Catholicism and Christianity, did a lot of bad things. It might have been done in the name of Christianity, but that's not Christianity. True Christianity, what Jesus left us with, anytime that took the influence and that was setting the agenda, it always left a positive impact. And we have more literacy today, less poverty today, less war today. And the world is actually advancing and progressing despite what we see on the news. We do see a lot of suffering on the news because the news shows the worst of the worst. It's always going to show the one crash or the place that's in war. And we do have regions of the world that are in war and have been for a long time. But if you actually look at history, we have less war now than we've ever had before. Even 50 years ago, way more people were dying. We had two world wars, and all throughout history, we had the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, we had colonization, we had slavery. Slavery does still exist today in different forms than before, but it was much more widespread before. So the world is progressing. We do have suffering, but if we look at suffering and say, where is God and does he care? The answer is yes, he does care. And the answer is you. That's why you're here. Of course God cares. That's why he sent you. That's why you exist on the earth. He sent Jesus because he cares. He came and he took on human flesh and suffered at the hands of people that he created because he cares. He created a supernatural way for us to be rescued from human limitations, which encompasses everything that I don't have time to get into right now because that's another video, but salvation, the Greek word for salvation, covers physical healing, it covers deliverance, which is salvation for your psyche, for your soul, deliverance from demonic bondage, addiction, depression, loneliness and fear and all anxiety, all these things. He provided everything we need, and then he kept sending us. Every person that's born is God's answer for that generation. Everyone has a calling to bring a solution from heaven, because you are from heaven, I'm from heaven. God breathed us out into the earth. But if we're supposed to live for ourselves, first of all, if we sit around looking around and see all this suffering in the world, and we say, why is there so much suffering? God must not care, and just complain. We're joining the problem and becoming part of the problem. When he sent us here to be part of the solution, we are the hands and feet of God. And you are the light of the world, whether you realize it or not, whether you believe in God or not. He did create you, and he is your true father. Whether you allow him to father you or not, he is your original father, and your original identity is in God. You have the image of God in you. We have the option of allowing that image to be skewed by evil, by selfishness, by having an unrenewed, earthly, selfish mind. But our origin is in heaven, and God, just like God sent Jesus, Jesus said, as my Father sent me, I am sending you. And he was sent to destroy the works of the devil. Every one of us is born to be the solution, to bring heavenly solutions to humanity. And so that's the answer. That's my answer to, does God care? My answer is yes, that's why you're here. God cares. He's here. He wants you to see, when you see suffering, not to just sit around and complain about it and say, we're all screwed, humanity sucks, and God doesn't care, but to see humanity, see other people, see yourself, and to see humanity as a whole the way God sees us. My dog is biting my feet. Nico, stop it. And see from the heaven's perspective, the eternal perspective, the value in each person, see the redemptive value in other people, their true purpose, because the suffering, the selfishness that people walk in, the hurt, the harm that people inflict upon others, that's because they don't know who they are, and they've allowed themselves to become part of the problem instead of recognizing that they are the solution and they're here for others. Because if I'm here for myself, first, if I live for myself, I'm like Dan Muller says, why don't you live for yourself? Well, why don't you put foil in a microwave? It wasn't made for that. Why shouldn't we live for ourselves? We weren't made for that. We weren't made to live for ourselves. And if you're living for yourself, you're not going to live a fulfilled life. And you won't have real, true satisfaction. You might have the illusion of satisfaction for a temporary period. It's not going to last. If you're living for yourself, you're going to end up miserable. Because we're meant to pour out. Because we're sons and daughters of love. God is love, and love is always pouring out. Love is never out seeking its own interests first. Anyways, we're here to serve others and to love others. And if God wanted me to live for myself, then he could have just left me in heaven, right? I'm from heaven, you're from heaven. Our origin is from God and in heaven. And in heaven, there's no sickness. If I'm just going to live, just a second, pause this. You get to be part of the video. He's going to be part of the video because he kept biting my laces, my shoelaces. So, where was I? Right. If I want to live for myself, no matter how much I enjoy and am able to take advantage of the benefits or the pleasures of this world, I can become the richest person alive, live in luxury, get massages every day, and have the best food, and travel all the time, and stay in the best hotels, and live in mansions, and all of that. But it would still pale in comparison to what we have in heaven. In our home country of heaven, we have way more. Like, the food is way better. There's way more traveling to do. If you like scuba diving, like, imagine the scuba diving in heaven, all the creatures in heaven. If you like traveling, we have 7 continents on Earth that are options. One is not too great. Most people don't want to go to Antarctica, but we have some cool travel options. I love traveling. I love traveling here. But in heaven, there's going to be way more places to go because heaven is way bigger than the earth. I heard someone say that there are angels in heaven the size of our planet. Whether that's true or not, it's a cool thing to think about. I wouldn't doubt it, because heaven is like God, probably infinite or close to infinite. There are more people in heaven. The people are great. The people are nice. Culture is amazing. The food is amazing. Whenever it comes out, you don't even want to eat it because it's too beautiful and perfect. You're like, I can't eat this. I can't touch this and mess it up. It's too perfect. You know, the angels are always bringing this food out that's perfect and amazing. Everything, the weather is perfect. It's never too hot. It's never too cold. Everything is beautiful. The scenery is amazing. Like the most beautiful. I've been to Foz do Iguaçu in Brazil, some of the biggest waterfalls in the world, and there's one of the I think the highest waterfall is in Venezuela, I think. I've seen some beautiful waterfalls in Hawaii, but all of those, like the simplest waterfall in heaven, like when you're like, okay, yeah, that's pretty, that makes, if that exists, right? But the simplest, whatever, however you want to put it, the simplest, least impressive waterfall in heaven, if it makes all those waterfalls I just talked about look like, yeah, that's nice, it's okay, I guess. Because everything there is way better. You can't possibly compare it. So, I say all that to make a point. My point is, if I'm going to live for myself, no matter how much I live for myself here, it can't compare with what I would have in heaven. So, if God wanted me to live for myself, why would He send me here? He would just leave me in heaven. And I understand, I'm starting to touch some strange theology. I'm not saying that does happen. I'm just saying, if God wanted to, He could breathe us out, breathe His Spirit out, and form us, and let us be born and grow up and live in heaven. As children that are aborted, they grow up in heaven. They miss out on having a life on earth, and that's not God's plan for us to just only live in heaven and never pass through earth. Because if He wanted us to live for ourselves, He would leave us in heaven because it's way better there. It's more luxurious. There's more comforts, there's more pleasures, there is purpose, there's way more to do, everything you can think of is better in heaven. But He sends us here because He has a purpose for us here. He sends us not to live for ourselves, because Jesus came and He said, I didn't come to be served. If I wanted to be served, I'd stay in heaven, sit on my throne and tell the angels, come rub my feet. He didn't. That's not the nature of God, and it's not our nature either. Jesus said, I came to serve, not to be served, and that's why we're here. We're born to serve. We're born to be part of the solution. We're born to bring what heaven has given us, and even more than that, because the resources of heaven, there are real resources of heaven, gifts, and all the angels of heaven are ready to serve us and cooperate with our authority in Christ to bring heaven to earth and the will of God to earth, and to bring supernatural changes. What you're capable of in your natural self and through natural means might not be that great. You can still actually change the world and contribute. But some people think, okay, I can't actually make a difference. It's true. You can't change and end all the suffering. But with God, nothing is impossible. And we do have amazing potential to see this world completely transformed, and it's going to be completely transformed, and it's going to keep transforming until it looks like heaven, because that's what God declared in the Bible. It says that there will be to the increase of His government there will be no end. The kingdom will always be advancing until not only the glory but the knowledge of the glory of the Lord fills the entire earth. So it is advancing. Things are getting better. There is suffering, and we're here to be the light, to be the salt. If we're light, you are light, so all you have to do is take the basket off your head. All I have to do is take the basket off my head and realize I am light. I'm here everywhere I go. I bring light to those around me. I shine. I take the blinders off people's eyes by showing them love, by being kind, by showing patience, and bring supernatural firepower to situations where it's needed. I mean, just love and kindness, that is supernatural, but something even more obviously supernatural, when there's disease, when there's sickness, bring supernatural firepower to push that disease out and cause someone to be completely healed of a disease or an injury or whatever it may be. It happens, and it's available. And sometimes we pray and we might not see something at first, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I've seen hundreds of miracles. I could tell you so many stories of like undeniable miracles that I've seen Jesus do. So it doesn't bother me when people tell me they don't believe anymore. I'm like, I've seen it too many times. I've been healed. I've seen other people healed of incurable things. And it's possible. If we say, well, why isn't everyone healed? Well, because not everyone's praying, and we don't pray every time. And it is a battle. Evil is real. Suffering is real. I'm not denying any of that. That's why I'm saying we need to recognize suffering is here. Sickness is here. Poverty is here. All of that is real. So instead of sitting on our butts and complaining about it and saying God doesn't care, why don't we get off our butts and say God does care, and that's why I'm here. I was born because He cares, and He sent me to do something about it, and He's ready to empower me. He's ready to act on my word and to fulfill my words, because He gave us charge over the earth. The heavens belong to the Lord, but the earth He gave to the sons of men. That's humanity. That's us. He gave it to us to steward it, to dominate it, and dominate in not in a sense of colonizing and enslaving, but dominating in the biblical sense of serving, cultivating, causing to grow, causing to produce fruit, and taking care of. Like God placed Adam in the garden to take care of, to have dominion over it, and to take care of it, take care of all the animals, the whole garden, make sure everything was well taken care of and stewarded well. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. So let's be light, let's be salt, let's let our words be seasoned with grace. I'm preaching to myself as well, because I have to constantly remind myself, and whenever I don't remind myself, when I don't bombard my mind with the Word of God, then that's when I start being inclined to walk in the flesh and live in a limited way. Patience being limited, kindness being limited, all of that. The flesh isn't evil, but it's limited. It needs to be submitted to the Spirit to be unlimited, so that you have unlimited power, unlimited love, unlimited kindness and patience, all of that. So I'm not preaching at anybody. I'm preaching for all of us. I'm declaring all this for all of us, because we all need it, and I need it just as much as you or anyone else does. But we are light, we are salt, and as light, we bring light to people, we bring love to people, we take the blinders off their eyes, the blinders of hatred, the blinders of unforgiveness and bitterness toward others. And as salt, we season people with grace, and we preserve people, and we protect them from the hardness of the sin in the world through encouragement. All of that, salt, being the salt of the earth, we let our words be full of grace, be seasoned with grace. And it protects people, it preserves people. But if the light is hidden, and if the salt loses its saltiness, then it's worthless. You're living a life void of worth, void of meaning, void of purpose, if you cover up the light in you, and if you let your words be complaining and talking bad about people and gossiping and putting people down and just me, and whining and talking about your problems, instead of just being a solution and filling the world with grace and kindness and peace and life and all the fruit of the Spirit that we are. Everything that's in the nature of God is ours. We participate in the nature of God through His great and precious promises. So we're here from heaven. We're born. That's the proof that God cares. He sent Jesus. Jesus died on the cross. That is the declaration. This is how we know what love is, that Jesus died for us. And there's no greater love than when someone gives their life, they lay down their life for their friends. So that's the proof that God cares. Not only that He sent Jesus, but that you're here. That shows God cares, because you're here because He cares. And you're here sent from heaven to colonize the earth, not in Europeans colonizing the Americas sense, but the opposite of that, colonizing, bringing life, not bringing disease and enslavement and torture as happened in the past to native peoples, but the opposite of that, heaven coming to the earth and bringing cures to sicknesses, bringing life, bringing peace, bringing freedom, setting people free from slavery, removing their shackles, busting people out of prisons, and filling people with all the love they need, all the spiritual nourishment they need to realize their full potential and live a free life, to see people move from slavery into being freed people and setting others free and living in purpose. Because you never know who someone truly is. If they're in slavery, you'll never know who they are. You only know who someone is either by seeing them in the spirit but on the outside, in the natural world, you'll only see the manifestation of who they really are if they're completely free, if they're completely full of all they need, all the love that they needed growing up. And if they didn't get it then, they get it supernaturally from God, and they receive what they didn't receive before, but they need to be completely free, full of love, know who they are, and then they'll start producing something that only they can produce. Whatever their art may be, whatever their skill may be, whatever their gifts may be, all of that comes out when they're free, when they're full of the love of God and full of the revelation of who they are. Then every single person has amazing things to bring to the table, amazing solutions to bring to this earth. And you and I are the solution. There is suffering in the world, God cares, and that's why we're here.